Hi, everyone. I'm Liam Kelman, a freshman at Crossroads High School, and I'm thanks. You don't need to clap. And I'm excited to welcome you to the first Friends of Semel first event of the Friends of Semel Teen Advisory Council. I'm honored to be a member of the inaugural Teen Advisory Council, and I hope that many students in the audience will consider joining us. The newly formed council gives high school students the opportunity to share their ideas and unique concerns about mental health, to meet students from other schools also interested in mental health, and to meet and learn from the Semel Institute faculty. Speaking of, Dr. Helena Hansen, the interim director of the Semel Institute, is here with us today, and I'd like to welcome her to the podium.
Wow, what an honor to help to open this first event of the Teen Advisory Council of Friends of Semel. It is just amazing to see all of you out here. You literally swam through rivers to get here right on a Saturday. It speaks volumes to your commitment and your support for this most impressive Teen Advisory Council. I can't say enough. We're going to see a film that speaks to the problems that we're saddling this young generation with. But at the same time, what you can see from the work of the Teen Advisory Council is that they are also the ones that are going to guide us through. They will solve these problems for us, and I have so much confidence in them. Just look at what they've achieved here. I also want to thank the Friends of Semel, who have also been running the quote-unquote adult Open Mind series, which I really encourage you to look into. It's an inspiring series of speakers and leaders in the field of mental health and brain science. But I just want to take a moment to thank Vicki Goodman, Wendy Kelman, and the Friends of Semel team that made the Teen Advisory Council possible and this event possible. Thank you. And with no further ado, we'll get to our event.
Dr. Hansen, thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to welcome everyone. The Teen Council is honored to host the screening of the documentary film Anxious Nation by Laura Morton. Its creator, co-director, writer, and producer, who is here to introduce her film. On behalf of the Teen Advisory Council, I'd like to thank our advisors, Brian Anderson, counselor at Brentwood School, Dr. Thomas Elliott, pediatrician and postdoctoral fellow, National Clinician Scholars Program at UCLA, and Ross Szabo, Director of Wellness at the Geffen Academy at UCLA. We would also like to thank Dr. John Piacentini, Child and Adolescent Psychologist Professor at the UCLA Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences, and the Director of UCLA Center for Child Anxiety, Resilience, Education, and Support, better known as CARES. It's an acronym. One last announcement. You should have received a flyer about the Open Mind Film Festival for high school students when you checked in. This is a unique film festival that features original films made by high school students about mental health issues. For students interested in film and in mental health, this is your chance to be creative and share your story. Send us your films and be sure to tell your friends to do so too. There are prizes. Thank you so much. Now let's give a warm welcome to Laura Morton, who will introduce her film.
So who said it doesn't rain in Southern California? They lied. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is such an honor and privilege for my entire Anxious Nation team. Our director, Vanessa Roth, couldn't be here today. I'm the co-director and everything else that they mentioned. But this is such a unique situation for us because when I first set out to make this film in 2018, I thought what was happening in our home was only happening in our home. I thought that my daughter at the time had been suffering from anxiety for 7 years. She's 14 now. And I couldn't figure out why it was happening. So I put a post on Facebook, Kids and Anxiety, Who's Dealing with It? And I got a lot of responses, and that was in 2018. And of course, along came COVID and poured gasoline all over this horrible burning inferno of mental health and issues for our kids and our families, and has made the problem significantly worse. When I set out to make this film, my dream was if we could eradicate this for the generation coming up. And I have so much faith with this Teen Advisory Council as a representative of what, how they see mental health now. I have so much faith that that actually is a possibility. I want to thank the Friends of Semel Institute for having us. I want to thank Wendy and Vicki. I want to thank all of you for coming out in the rain. I think that the film speaks for itself, so I'm not going to blab on. I'm just going to say thank you for being here and enjoy the movie.
Over. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know what I was feeling. I couldn't put it into words, but I'll tell you how badly it hurt. But along the way, I found an interesting newsworthy story that I am strong enough to face the fears, and I am brave enough, and I'm not gonna let you control me anymore. I'm gonna break out of my glass box and gonna shut that door.
Please stay seated for the discussion. Hi, I'm Katie Froelich, a junior at Brentwood School. And I'd like to once again thank Laura Morton, the filmmaker of Anxious Nation, for sharing her powerful movie with us all. Let's give her a round of applause. Now it's time for our panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. John Passantini, professor of psychiatry and biobehavioral sciences at UCLA, and the director of CARES, which is the UCLA Center for Child Anxiety, Resilience, Education, and Support. Two of our advisors, Brian Anderson, counselor at Brentwood School, and Dr. Thomas Elliott, pediatrician and UCLA postdoctoral fellow, National Clinician Scholar Program. Thea Touchton, MTV Mental Health Youth Action White House Forum participant, Sevi Morton, who you met in the film, Teen Advisory Council members, Sophie Tkachenko, a junior at Brentwood School, who unfortunately won't be here today because she's sick, Zach Gottlieb, a junior at Windward School, and Emily Mandelberg, a sophomore at Geffen Academy.
Okay. Boy, that was pretty amazing, wasn't it? That was just amazing. Yeah, I think another round of applause here. We saw this right before the holidays just to prepare, and I'll tell you it gets better with time because it was there's a lot in there. Just one thing, in case you are wondering where else you might be able to see this, or if you have other people that you would like to see this in your family, or maybe your therapists or doctors or Congress people, which I probably would recommend. May 1st, there's going to be a launch in conjunction with Mental Health Awareness Week. AnxiousNation.com is the website, and this is going to be released on Amazon, Apple, Roku, and Google Play. So thank you. So circle that date, and this will be available. I was wondering the same thing. There's so many people I want to share this with. So I have the pleasure of moderating this with some students here. And I want to make this a discussion, and I'm going to start by asking the first question to Sevi, who you may recognize from being in the movie. It's just an honor and a pleasure to have you here, and your mom, who's sitting in the front row. So what was it like making this movie? I mean, that was a pretty big lift.
Yeah, so it's been quite the journey because we started this in 2018, and it's been, I guess this year marks 5 years. Okay. 4. And it's been really quite the incredible journey. I obviously have grown up a little, so it's a little weird to see me when I was 11, 12, and 13. I know personally I've grown into what my anxiety is, and I've helped myself a lot. And it's been a great journey.
That's wonderful. It was really a really important role that you played in the movie, and there's a lot of millions of teens and adolescents and parents owe you a debt of gratitude for that. So thank you for sharing your life with us.
Thank you.
I'd like to open it up to the panel now, and I'm just going to throw this out to the teen advisory group members here. What do you think is the most important thing, or the most interesting thing, or most helpful thing that you learned from watching this movie?
Yeah, I feel like one thing that really stands out to me is how a lot of times we just don't know what people are going through, because obviously it's not like a physical condition like they described. If you have a rash, you're going to go get that checked out because you could literally see it. When you have something like anxiety, it's a lot harder to tell, and I think that's something that just really stood out to me.
Emily?
Okay. I think that it was really interesting to see a variety of different experiences and anxiety in different lights for different people in ways that it can affect that. And I think also with things too, like the art and the old cartoons and stuff too, was also really interesting. Also, I liked that.
Thank you, and Thea?
Yeah, for me, it was nice to know that I'm not alone a lot in anxiety. I feel like when I was going to school, I thought every other kid in school had it all together, right? But you don't see what's behind the curtain. And it's also interesting to see too, there is a parent-student, parent-child dynamic, teacher-student dynamic going on with the anxieties as well that I don't think we have all the answers to yet. And I think this movie also allows us to consider a lot of actions to take and where to go to next, because we're not finished in our journey with this.
Yeah, great. I'm going to ask Thomas. I'm going to ask you and Brian the same question, even though you've seen it as well. What was the one thing that you took home from the movie?
Oh yeah,
you're up here, so you're on the spot.
No worries.
No problem. I think that one thing that we don't talk about enough is the parent-child interaction and how that plays into mental health, especially anxiety. And I think that that's something that was outlined in the movie a lot, both explicitly and also subtly too, and just watching the interaction. So I was really, really surprised and pleased by that. As a pediatrician, I feel like that's a lot of my job is kind of putting it together as oh, there's another person in the room with you besides just the child or adolescent. and that has a lot of impact. So I was really happy about that.
Great. And Brian, maybe from the school perspective.
Yeah, as Thomas said, well, I think the parent-child dynamic, as some of the scenes were unfolding in the film, I heard groans in the audience at certain moments, and I could sense that people could sense some of those parent-child interactions that might be contributing to anxiety, or it might be contributing to like perpetuating some patterns of unhealthy thinking. So I think it's good to see people sensing that and also understanding the importance of that relationship. And then as far as from the school perspective, as a counselor at Brentwood, shout out to my Brentwood students out here. I would just say I'm really proud of this generation, and that would be the other takeaway for me from the documentary, is that the willingness, the openness to be on the stage, to be on a film, sharing about this is something that previous generations were not able to accomplish. And so for me, the work has been enjoyable because this generation is ready to go in a way that is different, is new, and is already making a huge difference.
So we saw a lot in the movie from the teens' perspective, or the kids' perspectives, that anxiety often goes unrecognized. And just again for the four of you, can you recognize anxiety in your peers? How does that happen? I mean, we see there's maybe 30 or 40% now are the latest statistics after the pandemic of kids are struggling with anxiety. So how do you recognize anxiety in your peers or in yourselves?
Well, I often recognize it. For me, there's like a shift in the air. Like sometimes it's just like an energy, because anxiety is not always just like shaking and, tears. Sometimes the most confident person in the room can smile and inside their brain is going like at 100 miles per hour. And so there's sometimes where there's just like, you can just tell there's not like an authenticity, or like, it's just like an energy check. Like, I don't know. It's like part of it is like intuition. Obviously too, sometimes people like hold their breath, right, when they're talking, and you can sense this sort of uneasiness. And there's always that thing of like, oh, do you call it out in the moment because you don't want to like make somebody more anxious in that? But I think noticing that and figuring out where you can have a conversation to be like, oh, hey, I noticed things were like a little strange there, and starting the conversation from there is really important.
I totally agree. I think recognizing anxiety in other people, especially my close friends, there's definitely a change in tone, and there's a change in their mood. And that's for me too. I think whenever I get anxious, I don't want to be around people, and that any little thing could affect me. So I think it has a lot to do with seeing the change in tone or change in personality.
Yeah, I feel like personally, if I'm anxious, like maybe I have a test or whatever it may be, I feel like weirdly overly energetic. So that's like the main place I see that. And some of my friends, it's more if there's something off, like they're not really finding things funny, they're not like as social as they usually are, then maybe I'll check in a little bit. I don't want to like call them out because, I mean, like you said, like it could make them even more anxious, but I'll definitely notice if maybe they're not as social as, they usually are, or they're not like as active in like school or whatever it may be.
Great. Do you want to answer that, or do we can have another question?
I think a lot of people said what I was going to say.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So the next step from that is, we can recognize, we know, I think that's just so eloquent, and so experiential, feeling like a chill or something changing. Are there things that you as students can do, or as peers, or as friends, that you can do that you think would be helpful when you sense this in a classmate or a friend or a sibling or whoever? Are there?
Or you can go if you want. Okay. I think that the best thing you can do is kind of just be there for someone and ask them what they want, because it's different for everybody. Like some people want to be alone when they're upset, and some people want people, or they want validation, or that can make them feel, or too much attention can make them feel like they're like this special case. or whatever. So like, or some people like hugs and some people don't, like, you know, or some people like a gift or something, or, you know, like, or you to do like something for them. So just like kind of ask the person what you can do, I think, because it's different.
I totally agree. I think, as we said before, we don't want to call them out, because I know how terrible it can be when you're right on the verge of that and someone says, "Oh, are you okay?" And that can put everything over the edge. And so you don't want to call them out, but, you know, a simple like, "Hey, like, is there anything I can do for you?" is great. And if they say yes, and if they want to talk, be there to listen, or if they don't, respect that. And I think it's all support. It's all support.
Yeah, it's 100% important to create that space to be able to share your mental health experiences and have that trust. I think number one, when you're reaching out to somebody in a crisis or who's going through that, is just to listen, right? Let them have the floor. Let them be the star for a second, and not interject with your advice, because oftentimes people don't necessarily need you to solve their problem. They just need to work it out and get it outside of their head, because it's so much easier to deal with when it's not trapped in here. Another process that I've been doing, and something that I've like started with my resolution this year, is to kind of invite my friends on self-care days and create more of a space of like that you don't really have to go through mental health things alone, and starting to like share, like, go out and take care of yourself. Like if you have anxiety about getting a haircut, right? Because sometimes that's a process. Inviting your friends to go and share that space with you, because you don't have to be alone unless you want to be, and that's like the best for your process.
I think that relates to, was very struck even the second time seeing this with Cooper's mom and the perspective. And that also relates, I think, to I forgot what the direct quote was, "We are not singular, we are plural," or people are best when they're plural. So reaching out in that regard. But, you know, we saw a number of the parents struggling with understanding their children and where they were coming from, and understanding their perspective. Again, Cooper's mom might have been the most dramatic example of that. What can kids do, or what would you like your parents or teachers, how can they best understand where you're coming from? You all talked about listening, but are there other ways as well to communicate?
I think it has something to do with actually sitting down and having the conversation about what you're feeling, because it can be really difficult for people to really understand these feelings when you don't have them. So I think with the parents, especially, if you sit down and you have that conversation, that can make the worlds of differences.
To add on to that, also for that conversation, probably to not always just be when it's already too late, to do that earlier in the process, and not do it when it's already on the verge of like collapsing, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like setting those boundaries early on is just really important, because a lot of like parents don't know. Obviously, Cooper's mom thought she could nail all of those auditions. I doubt she could actually nail all of those auditions. But saying, "Hey, this is actually really tough for me, and even though I'm a great singer, I could be the best singer in the world, and I'm not going to get every audition," right? And I think being really clear about what expectations are actually manageable is what you need to do.
Are there specific things in your experience or experience of others, or even that you noticed from the movie, that parents or teachers seem to have the most difficulty in understanding? And I know there are several parents of you in the audience, so you can talk in the third person if you'd like.
I think that obviously parents don't really understand a lot of the phone and the social media and that stuff. I will say, as I am a young adult now, I work on my phone a lot, and we're in a different space where you can do that, and sometimes, and I prefer to work on my phone rather than my computer, but it is like jarring, because there are so much research about what that can do to you, but we live on screens, and that is our society with tech, and I think it comes in with like making sure you can do those sorts of checks, like making sure that you're not sitting still all day, that you're getting up, and that you're still prioritizing like drinking water, right? You can get so absorbed in your work and stuff as well. But I don't think parents see that that social media world is now a part of business, and it's not going away, unfortunately.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really agree with that. I feel like social media is a real part of our lives, and I think that it gets a really bad rap. Like, it's only bad, but what a lot of parents and educators really fail to see is that social media allows us to connect in ways that just weren't possible 20 years ago, which I think is really nice. At the same time, as we were saying, balance is also key. I mean, like, if you're on your phone 8 hours a day, even if you're trying to be healthy, it's just not good for you. So maybe you're on your phone being very intentional about what you're looking at, and then maybe going for a walk, like exercising, doing something like that.
I definitely agree. And I think, I agree. I think social media really does, as I have personal experiences with social media, as you guys saw, I was using my phone 10 hours a day at one point, which is better now. I don't do that anymore. But I think the whole phone situation in general, that's how I talk to my friends. That's how I talk to my friends, especially because I'm traveling so much right now. I need to keep up my social life. And so I understand that having the phone and being on your phone it could be damaging, but at the same time, if you balance it correctly, it's normal for us now.
Yeah, it really does seem to cut both ways. I mean, with social media, and as parents, I think we need to understand a little bit better not to demonize social media. Many adults are as connected and use social media as much or more than you all do, but that rarely gets spoken about. But I think that's an important thing to understand. So in terms of parents, and some of these questions actually came from you all, and there's one that I think is really interesting. Do you think there are things that parents can do for children when they are young that can influence their level of anxiety when they get older?
I feel like when parents, say things like, "You're not a good math student," or just flat out say something that feels very fixed like that. And I think as they get older, that's just going to stick with them. And then every time they have a math test, they'll be extra anxious because in the back of their minds, it's the person that's supposed to be supporting me, my parent, doesn't think I'm good enough.
Yeah, I think another thing is I often feel like parents, they have a child and then they're like, this kid is a mini me. And it's hold on, slow down. That kid is actually an individual person, right? And yes, it has characteristics of you, but it is also somebody different, and you have to let that breathe and you have to accept who that is. One thing that I do wish that my parents did is I wish that they invited me on their own self-care processes. And I think that's kind of hard because I think our generation has a little bit of a leg up and into previous generations of that being more accepting, but also being able to kind of discover the highs and lows of life together. You don't always have to have it figured out as a parent. I liked those moments when my mom would be like, I don't know, and then we could maybe kind of see it together, because that's human in life. Nobody knows everything.
Yeah, that's really great. Are there other things that you think parents should teach their children or model for their kids that would be helpful? I mean, that was a great example there. But what else can parents do, either early on or now, to help kids with anxiety?
I think when you're younger, I feel like it'd be great to just teach them sort of about it and sort of to know some symptoms and how to deal with it. I feel like teaching them good coping skills early would be very, very useful.
In your experience, Sevi, when did you realize that you had anxiety was a problem, or even what it was?
I don't really remember my first initial deal with anxiety, but I feel like when I was most aware of it is I used to go to a summer camp where it was a sleepaway camp for 7 weeks in the summer, and I feel like that's when I first knew it was an issue for me, because I would cry every day. I had really bad separation anxiety, So I would cry every day. I would fake injuries to go to the nurse's office so I could call my mom. And I would just say, I can't be there, and I would need her to come pick me up, and it was really difficult for her because she didn't know if this was what Lynn Lyons would say, doing the disorder. So that was definitely my awakening with thinking that anxiety was definitely a problem.
What about school? What can schools do better, do you think, to help kids recognize and manage their anxiety?
I think school is like kind of like the place to get like anxious, because like people often like think it's like school's just anxiety because of like tests, which it is that also, but at the same time, even when it's like, oh, it's break time, it's lunch, then you can get socially anxious. Or even with that, even if you have a good group of friends and you're solid with that, like you can feel other people judging you there. Or like me and my friends a lot of times talk about other people at lunch, and we're trying to do that less. Like everyone's just talking about each other, and it's not. we're trying to be better. But like, yeah, so it's kind of, and then when you get home, it's just more homework, and then a lot of times you don't have like a break. The energy for me, like all I have to do is, the energy to do for a break is be on my phone, but then that makes it harder for me to start homework, and then I'm tired.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm a freshman in high school right now, so I'm really just experiencing all these new. I go to a school with 3,000 people, so it's definitely, there's the homework piece, there's the schoolwork piece, and then there's the social piece. And people can be mean. That's really true. So I feel like what schools can do is have a better system for dealing with all of that, and even dealing with people getting anxiety attacks in the middle of tests, or anxiety attacks because of something social that happened with a friend group. Just better ways of dealing with all of that. And I also think mental health needs to be taught, like how health is taught. And I'm noticing it more now that I'm taking health in high school, but I feel like mental health is just as important as physical health and should be taught just as regularly as physical health is.
Yeah.
So true. I have a lot of notes for schools, so listen up. One, I had one school counselor in a whole school with 365 students. How is that going to work? We need to have more mental health professionals on a school campus. Also, school lunches, they resemble prison food. Not okay, need to be more nutritious. School seats, okay, they're not comfortable. How can you expect to be sitting like 8 hours a day in maybe the most back-breaking chairs I've ever met? Your tax dollars are paying for this, and it's utter garbage. So there's like lots of things that can be improved, and I think it's important to know, like, it is your money, like going to the schools, public or private. It is going to there, so you have a say on how it looks, right? And it's important to be involved and change that and make it work for the kids. I also think that we're spending too much time like inside sitting all day. Like we need moments to stretch and that not be considered like an ADHD breakout, because it's not. It's normal. When you have a real job, you have to do that. But anyway, if you want to hear more, I'm around.
All right.
Yeah, I really agree with all of that. I'd say for me, in school, we'll have this like rare conversation where they're telling us, you need to talk about what you're feeling, and then we'll kind of laugh because we're like, we have no idea how to do that. We don't know how to share any of this. We kind of just like laugh at them. So I think instead of telling us to have these conversations, they should be modeling how to have these conversations, and I feel like that's just not done enough. I also think just simple things like not having... Thank you. Thank you. Another thing is, like, last week there was a day where I literally had 3 tests, and just something as simple as that, like having a test calendar, that could reduce a lot of stress.
I think we're almost out of time, but what I'd like to do to end is to have each one of our teen panelists give your best advice to the audience on how they can help the kids that they teach or their own kids or that they work with. What can they do to enhance or to support kids in ways to improve their mental health?
I feel like the most important thing is being open to their experiences. I think a lot of parents, like especially Cooper's mom, perfect example, she thought it's like it was her way was right. She was right. She knew exactly what her kid could do, exactly what her kid was capable of doing. And I think parents really need to understand that the landscape of what it's like to be a teenager in 2023 is so different from when they were kids. And they just need to really be aware of what that's like.
I totally agree, and I also think that we should normalize it a little, because as we said in the movie, like, you may never know what someone is going through, so don't just automatically assume that it's like something that's super like not normal and that it's something we should freak out about, because it's not. Everybody deals with something different. So I feel like just be there for support and really do what needs to be done, because it's important.
I don't really know what to say. It's like a big question of like overarching all of it.
Yeah.
Wait, I can try to think of an answer. Wait, that's more embarrassing. Okay, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. Emily, you have answered so many questions so wonderfully already. You don't need to answer anymore. You've contributed. Yeah.
I think that's honestly a perfect example, is admit what you don't know as a parent, you know what I mean? And keep researching. It's out there, and mental health needs you to be involved right now. There are so many nonprofits out there. There are so many programs. Get involved, research, learn these answers. This is bigger than your children, too. This is the community that they're entering in, and there's space for you here, and there's space to be built and problems to be solved.
Great. Do we have time for a couple of audience questions, or should we? Okay, great. I see one in the back there and then there. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, we have to wait for microphones. While we're waiting, don't you feel good about the future? And the mentors, Thomas and Brian, who are mentoring and working with this group, absolutely amazing.
One thing that I wondered about was, because a lot happens in kids as, they develop and their hormones are changing and things like that. As a parent, I think you don't recognize you've never had a teenager before. I remember a friend of mine who used to say on her daughter's birthday every year, I've never been a mom of a 6-year-old. I've never been a mom of a 12-year-old. Every year she would let her know, so help me, But one of the things that I wondered about and that the film didn't really address was, I felt like in those moments when the kids said, it's like, I want it to stop, I can't get relief. If the connection between a lot of the substance abuse that happens and how often it is, them trying to self-medicate, trying to not feel it, trying to, escape. And I think sometimes that's really hard, understanding that, I think the education in school would be helpful then, where they don't separate, drugs and alcohol as just being a bad thing, and they understand that often there is a relationship with mental health and why it happens. And lastly, one thing that I also was struck by was the feeling that you're not good enough, that you're ashamed of the mistakes, of all of that, because, I mean, we've all, to a certain degree, have mistakes and have this. And I know growing up, my youngest daughter had problems, especially with drugs and alcohol. And later, we discovered, it's been such a journey, but that she was bipolar. And, so the medication has really helped, but learning the coping skills, I wish I had recognized it before she got into drugs and alcohol for relief. And that's what I felt the most.
Would somebody like to address this question?
I'm not quite, I really liked your thoughts. I'm not quite sure what you were asking, but what I wanted to add on to, not like a rude way, like the question you're asking me, but I wanted to add on to something from that there, I didn't mean that in a rude way there. I did want to add on to the thing you were talking about that your friend said on their child's birthday every year. It's the child's first time being 6 or 7 or 8, etc. too. It's not just the parent's first time being a mom of a 6, 7, 8-year-old. It's also the child's first time being a middle schooler, high schooler, someone out on their own. So you're going through that experience together. I think when you think about the mom thing, it's hard to remember. It's both your first times being whatever.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah, amazing point. I think too, it's okay sometimes to be oh, this is the first time and I don't understand it, and it really is okay to make a mistake as a parent. You're not going to be perfect. It's going to be all right. Your kids will forgive you. So I think it's sometimes just going to finding your own support group, right, and being was your daughter like this at 6, and trying to find that story, and also going to your daughter and be I'm not understanding this. Can you explain this to me? I think it is unfortunate too, because a lot of people fall through the cracks. My mom is in her late 40s now and was officially diagnosed with bipolar 2. The system has not caught up, and that sucks, right? And there's work to be done there. I would like everybody to just keep a hope in their heart, because it is being done. But the other thing too that I thought was really interesting is about the drugs and alcohol. There was a really, really interesting TikTok I found and it was people don't understand that marijuana, alcohol, all of that stuff is a coping mechanism. And it may not be the best coping mechanism, but that is how some people view it. And often problems start because that is the only coping mechanism that they have access to. And that's a big part. I have a whole production company that we're working on, really honestly inspired by Laura's documentary. We're starting to do more mental health documentaries to break down these processes and let people know that there are more coping skills than just this, because people just don't know what they don't know.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Brian. You go first.
I'll say one thing, and then I have a student that might actually want to jump up here and say something about this herself. I'll just say one thing is the schools that we can do is we had to evolve from back in the 80s Just Say No campaign to this is a reality and we have to talk about it, and we can't judge it, and we can't treat it as something that's criminal, or else we completely shut down the conversation and then nothing can be done about it, right? So we've made a lot of progress in that area as far as you said, naming this as a coping mechanism and kind of destigmatizing it by doing that, and making the conversation be open rather than one that's full of judgment or shame, which actually shuts down the conversation. You want to say something?
I just wanted to say with the schools, how important that is, that they teach about the mental health, because, as you say, it takes privilege to be able to go to therapists in this country. And the expense of it, really, there's a huge inequity in families and in parts economic, stratas of our society. So really, the only place where you can have more equality in learning coping tools and also being more aware of mental health is in the schools.
So I'm Katie, talked before, but tomorrow I'm actually 8 months sober. I was using since I was 11 after back surgery, and that's a whole nother issue, our medical system. But there's such a stigma around drugs and alcohol, and that they're only used to party and how it's a social thing. And it can start off as a social thing, but then it just goes down a rabbit hole and you end up lost and confused. And what started out as either numbing mental issues or trying not to feel anything, it can go further than that without even being realized. And so we had someone speak at our school about the fentanyl epidemic, which is a whole nother issue. But they were preaching knowledge over abstinence, which I thought was interesting. So like no, like KNOW over no, which was pretty cool.
Let's just thank you, Katie. I get to work with Katie every day, and it's amazing. Thank you, Katie.
Just one final thought on this question. You know, substance abuse has similar underpinnings. They're the nature versus nurture. So there's risk for substance abuse as well. Anxiety increases the risk. These all speaks to the need for early recognition and intervention and teaching kids coping strategies as well. People see anxious kids as a problem within the child. They see the same thing with substance use. They see the same thing with depression, with ADHD. That really needs to change. You're gonna, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing around that. I think that, and this was said in the movie, but I just want to reiterate it, right? Like, you are your child's first teacher, you're your child's first therapist, you're all of that for your child. Before you go into our crazy mental health system that I could talk to you more about later, that's you, right? And so the reason why we need to learn, like you were saying, right? The reason why parents and the community needs to learn is that if children do not get that in the house, they will seek it somewhere else. Like, that's 100% what will happen. And when we think about substance use, I think that is one way in which we have stigmatized this, but really when we think about this is a person who is seeking out whatever they're seeking out because of something they don't have intrinsically in their home. And I think that that's something that when we start talking about like no instead of KNOW, instead of no, I think that's something that we need to start understanding is that like what were we missing, right? When we need to start looking back and being like, what were we missing in which that we have gotten to this place? And I think when we start understanding that, and we start understanding everything basically is a coping mechanism. I can talk to you more about that later. Everything is a coping mechanism. I think it will start making sense, some of the choices that we stigmatize.
I think there was another question in the back somewhere.
Yeah, thanks. So there's a line between doing the disorder, or a line or a path between doing the disorder and tough love. And so as a parent, my question is, how can we as parents be supportive on a day-to-day basis within that path and before or during an anxious moment? You know, like, so where you're not doing the disorder and it's not tough love. So how can parents be supportive and react and respond or help?
I think you can be there for your child and you can you can give them advice, you can offer things, but where the line ends is doing things. You don't want to do, like we saw in the movie when it was explaining doing the disorder, when Jackie, Cooper's mom, was making Cooper's bed for her. She probably shouldn't have done that because it's giving in to the cult leader. So I think you can be there for them, and I think you can offer all the love and support. But then doing it, you can't cure your child's anxiety for them. You can't cure anxiety in general, but you can help it. So I think, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
I feel like being, okay. I was just going to say, I feel like being too inquisitive can sometimes actually be like harmful. And if you do that too much, then they'll think like, oh, something's actually like really, really wrong with me. So I think giving them a safe space to come talk if they need to, but only if they need to, is just really important to like set the difference between like, I think you need this versus your child actually like thinking they need it.
Another recommendation I would give, probably not in the anxious moment, but at a time of calm, is to have a conversation about your boundaries and their boundaries, because I think that will help a lot. And it's going to be probably a series of conversations, not just one conversation to work out. But that's where you could go. Be like, I've got to draw a line. Like, I don't feel like this is helping when I do this for you. So this is where I'm at, right? And that's just going to be a process. You can do that with a therapist, obviously, but I know that sometimes the expense is something, is a cost there. But I know there's like a lot of YouTube videos on boundaries, and it's a topic that's coming up more, but that's something that I would recommend exploring.
Yeah, thanks. That's kind of the moment that I'm like more afraid of.
You can do it. Be brave. You got this.
This boundary setting is a little rough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a process for everyone.
And thank you guys.
Any other questions? I think maybe we would have time for maybe one more question. This can be the last.
I have a question about. Can you hear?
Yes.
Great. First off, thank you all so much. This has been and thank you. This is an amazing film. I have a question about the changes of anxiety with the different developmental stages of our brain. In our household, the cues that were present when I look back, when our kid was younger, are looking different than where they are today, and I expect will look different than where they are tomorrow, just because of the way the brain develops. And I'm not in your field, so I don't know. I know that just logically, but I don't know how to prepare myself for how things are going to be as my kid's brain is developing, how the anxiety and the brain development interact. So I'd love to hear some thoughts on that, medically and anecdotally from your experiences going through that process. Thanks.
Personally, and I know this can be similar for other people, when you're in elementary school, you're really not, the worries you have are about monsters under your bed and in your closet, and then you get into middle school and it starts to be more social, and then you get into 8th grade, into 9th grade, 10th, and all the way through high school. I think it becomes more self-conscious and social, and how you're going to set yourself up for a life, a career, a job. And so I think it develops within just, growing up and just realizing, looks, friends, jobs, careers, college, and everything in between.
I think in the movie they talked about don't pay attention to the specific anxiety, it's more the mechanism. I think anxiety hijacks or supercharges your brain, whatever issues you're facing in everyday life. That's what's going to go through the anxiety filter and get magnified. So I think Seva, you described it beautifully, that it really tracks the issues that any of us would have at specific ages, worries or challenges or even excitements. That's going to be the focus there. Good. I think there was one more person with the microphone, so let's make this the last question.
Hi. The balance between following the cult leader and the tough love, they mentioned that when one parent takes it too far in one direction and the other is in the other direction, then they just stake out their territory and become even more disparate. So for parents who can actually recognize and admit that they are in that situation, how can they start having a conversation and get more towards skill building?
I think that's a great question. In seeing both all ages with anxiety, I think that what needs to happen, I sometimes do it in clinic, where I'm like, I see now that we are at two different places in the world. But I think that the most important conversation that needs to be had is like, what do we want that is the best for the child? Right? And I know that's a really corny thing for me to say. I know, I get it. But I think that that's the conversation that needs to be had. Because when you have that conversation with both of the parents, they both want oh, I don't want them to experience this because I worry about them going out into the world and doing blank or whatever, what have you. The person who's dug in is like, well, if I don't give them what they need, then they will learn, right? From like I'm summarizing, right? And the person from the other side will be like, well, listen, like they're gonna have to go to school, thrive, live, and if we don't give them that, they won't have that, right? But they both want that person, that person inside, that adolescent, to thrive, right? Like that's the common vein. And so I feel like if you, one, unite them under that, right? And then think about like, as a united front, the best way that we're gonna be able to do this is united. If we keep doing this on two different sides of the world, like we are basically depriving that child, adolescent, or whatever, what have you, of the support and the coping skills, as we were talking about before, of what they need. And so I think that's how I usually like bring them together. And I think that having a united front on that of like, let's pick some, we didn't talk about this, I don't think, just yet, but I think incrementally is how you should go with that, right? Like, pick one thing, like, okay, we need to move you from like not having everything tucked in to having everything tucked in to not having everything tucked in, right? Like, and so going straight to like, we're not tucking in your stuff, right? Like that's not gonna work, right? But incrementally, if we can do it in day-to-day things, you can eventually get there. So that's my thoughts.
Well, thank you to Laura Morton and Sevi for a wonderful film and for coming up here, and to Sevi for being on the panel, as well as the Friends of Semel, Vicki Goodman and Wendy Kelman for being wonderful. Dr. Hansen, the Chair of Department of Psychiatry, thank you for being here. And most importantly, the amazing Friends of Semel Teen Advisory Group and their faculty advisors, Thomas and Brian. Thank you all.